It was a bright, sunny morning at Lincoln Middle School. The kind of day where birds chirped, kids laughed, and the air smelled like fresh grass. But for Jake Carter, stepping through those big school doors felt like walking straight into a lion's den. His heart thumped a little faster and his sneakers squeaked on the shiny floor. Jake was the new kid, and being new was tough. He was skinny, with messy brown hair that always flopped over his eyes like a curtain he could hide behind. He kept his head down, his shoulders hunched, clutching his old blue backpack like it was his only friend in the world. Jake wasn't loud like other kids. He didn't shout in the hallways or joke around with big groups. Nope, he was quiet, super quiet. The kind of quiet that made people wonder what he was thinking. Most kids at Lincoln Middle School didn't even notice him. They were too busy running to class, tossing footballs, or giggling with their friends. But not everyone ignored Jake. Oh no, some kids had already spotted him, and to them he looked like an easy target, someone they could tease. Someone who wouldn't fight back. What those kids didn't know, what Jake never told a single soul, was that he wasn't just some shy, skinny kid. Hidden under his baggy gray hoodie was a secret, a huge secret. The kind of secret that could turn everything at Lincoln Middle School upside down. But Jake wasn't ready to share it, not yet. For now, all he wanted was to get through the day without any trouble. Just one day where he could slip through the halls, eat his lunch, and go home without anyone picking on him. Was that too much to ask? The school was big, with long hallways lined with red lockers and posters about math club and the spring dance. Kids zoomed past Jake, their voices loud and happy. He dodged a group of girls giggling over a phone and stepped around two boys tossing a pencil back and forth. Nobody said hi to him. Nobody waved. That was okay, though. Jake was used to being invisible. He liked it that way. It felt safer. If nobody noticed you, nobody could hurt you, right? But deep down, Jake knew it wouldn't be that easy. Trouble had a way of finding him, no matter how quiet he stayed. He could feel it, like a storm waiting to break. His fingers tightened on his backpack straps as he walked toward his first class. English, room 204. He just had to make it there, sit in the back, and keep his head down. Simple plan. Outside, the sun kept shining. Inside, the school buzzed with energy. Jake took a deep breath and pushed his hair out of his eyes. He didn't want to stand out. He didn't want to be seen. But already he could feel eyes on him. Not friendly eyes, not curious eyes, mean eyes, the kind that made his stomach twist into a knot. In the cafeteria yesterday, he'd heard whispers. "Who's that kid?" one boy had said, pointing at Jake. "He looks weird," another had laughed. Jake had pretended not to hear. He'd stared at his tray, mashed potatoes and a soggy chicken nugget, and tried to disappear. But those words stuck with him. Weird, loser, nobody. That's what they thought of him. That's what they saw when they looked at him. Just a skinny kid with old clothes and a quiet voice. But they were wrong, so wrong. Jake wasn't what they thought. He wasn't weak. He wasn't scared. He was something else entirely. Something nobody at Lincoln Middle School could even guess. His secret wasn't just a little thing like knowing how to juggle or owning a cool pet lizard. No, it was big, bigger than anything those kids could imagine. It was the kind of secret that made Jake different, not in a bad way, but in a way that could change everything. Jake didn't talk about it. Not to his teachers, not to the nice lady in the lunch line, not even to his mom when she asked how school was going. He kept it locked up tight, like a treasure chest buried deep in his heart. Why? Because secrets like his weren't safe to share. Not yet, not until the time was right. And right now, the time wasn't right. Right now, Jake just wanted to blend in, to be normal, to make it through one day without anyone laughing at him or pushing him around. But as he walked down the hallway, he couldn't shake the feeling that today wasn't going to be normal. Something was coming. He could sense it, like the way you feel a storm before the first raindrop falls. His sneakers kept moving one step after another, but his mind was racing. What if someone tripped him? What if someone stole his backpack? What if those mean kids from yesterday found him again? Yesterday had been bad, not the worst day, but bad enough. Jake had been sitting outside during recess, leaning against a tree with a book. He liked books. They were quiet, like him. They didn't judge you or call you names. But then a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see a tall boy with spiky blonde hair and a mean grin. Ethan, that was his name. Jake had heard it before. Ethan was in 8th grade, a year older than Jake, and he acted like he owned the school. "What's this, a nerd book?" Ethan had said, snatching the book from Jake's hands. Jake's heart had jumped, but he didn't move. He just sat there, frozen, watching as Ethan flipped through the pages. "Wow, you're such a loser," Ethan had laughed, tossing the book into the dirt. His friends, 2 other boys with loud voices, had laughed too. They stood there, staring at Jake, waiting for him to do something. Cry maybe, or run away. Jake didn't cry, he didn't run. He just picked up his book, brushed off the dirt, and put it back in his backpack. His hands shook a little, but he hoped nobody noticed. Ethan had looked disappointed. "You're no fun," he'd said, walking away with his friends trailing behind. Jake had watched them go, his heart pounding. He wanted to say something. He wanted to stand up and shout, "You don't know me," but he didn't. He stayed quiet, always quiet. That was yesterday. Today felt different, though. Jake couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way the air felt heavier, or the way his stomach kept twisting. He reached room 204 and slipped inside just as the bell rang. The classroom was loud, with kids talking and throwing paper wads. Jake found a seat in the back near the window and sank into it. He pulled his hoodie up, letting the hood cover most of his face. Invisible, safe. The teacher, Mrs. Larson, started talking about some book they were supposed to read. Jake tried to listen, but his mind kept wandering. He thought about Ethan. He thought about those mean eyes in the hallway. He thought about his secret. Nobody here knew about it. Nobody knew what he could do, what he'd learned, what he'd trained for. They saw a skinny kid with messy hair, but they didn't see him, not the real Jake. He glanced out the window. The sun was still bright, bouncing off the playground swings. A few kids were out there, probably sneaking out of class. Jake wished he could be out there too, away from the noise, away from the eyes. But he couldn't. He had to stay. He had to get through this day and the next one and the one after that. That's what his mom always said. Just keep going, Jake. You're stronger than you think. Stronger, that word made Jake's lips twitch, almost like a smile. If only she knew, if only they knew, but they didn't, and Jake wasn't going to tell them, not yet. His secret wasn't something you just blurted out. It wasn't something you showed off to make friends or shut up bullies. It was bigger than that. It was part of who he was, deep down in a place nobody could touch. The class dragged on. Mrs. Larson passed out worksheets and Jake scribbled answers without really thinking. His pencil moved fast, but his mind was somewhere else. He kept seeing Ethan's face, that mean grin. He kept hearing those words, loser, weirdo, nobody. They stung even though he told himself they didn't. He wasn't a loser. He wasn't a nobody. He was Jake Carter, and he had something nobody else in this school had, something that made him special. The bell rang, snapping Jake out of his thoughts. Kids jumped up, grabbing their bags and rushing for the door. Jake moved slower, waiting until the room was almost empty. He didn't want to get caught in the hallway crowd. Too many elbows, too many chances for trouble. He slung his backpack over one shoulder and stepped into the hall, keeping his eyes on the floor. That's when he heard it, a laugh, loud, sharp, and way too familiar. Jake's stomach dropped. He didn't have to look up to know who it was. Ethan. He was somewhere close, probably with his friends, probably looking for someone to mess with. Jake's heart started pounding again, but he kept walking, head down, eyes low, just another kid in the crowd. But deep inside, something stirred. Not fear, not anger, something else, something strong. Jake's secret was still there, tucked away, waiting. He didn't want to use it. He didn't want to need it. But if Ethan pushed him too far, if things got too bad, Jake might not have a choice. And when that happened, nobody, not Ethan, not his friends, not the whole school, would ever look at Jake the same way again. So why was Jake so quiet? Why did he let kids like Ethan laugh at him? That's what everyone wondered. Maybe even you're wondering right now. Well, stick around, because this story, about to get wild. Jake's not what he seems, and the truth, it's going to blow everyone away. The trouble started at lunch, right in the middle of the noisy cafeteria at Lincoln Middle School. Jake Carter sat alone at the edge of a long table, far from the crowds of kids laughing and shouting. His tray had a plain ham sandwich, a bag of chips, and a shiny red apple. He picked at the sandwich, pulling off tiny bits of bread, trying to stay invisible. Being invisible was Jake's plan. If nobody noticed him, nobody would bother him, but that plan wasn't working today. A shadow fell over his tray. Jake's heart gave a little jump, but he didn't look up. He didn't need to. He already knew who it was. Ethan Reed, the king of 8th grade, swaggered up with his crew of buddies trailing behind him like noisy puppies. Ethan was tall, with spiky blonde hair and a grin that wasn't friendly at all. He was loud, always yelling or joking, and he loved picking on kids who couldn't fight back. To Ethan, Jake looked like the perfect target, quiet, skinny, and alone. "Hey, new kid," Ethan said, his voice mean and sharp. He leaned over Jake's table, snatching the apple right off the tray. He tossed it to one of his friends, a short kid with a loud laugh. "What's wrong? Too scared to talk?" Ethan's words stung like a slap. The kids at the next table heard him and giggled, their eyes darting to Jake. Jake's cheeks turned hot and red, but he didn't say a word. He just stared down at his sandwich, like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Ethan's friend tossed the apple back, and Ethan caught it with a smirk. He held it up, turning it in his hand like it was a prize. "You don't need this, do you?" he said, laughing. His buddies laughed too, their voices high and wild, like hyenas in a pack. Jake's fingers curled into fists under the table, but he kept his face blank. He didn't move, he didn't speak. He just sat there, letting Ethan's words bounce off him. "Pathetic," Ethan said, leaning closer. His breath smelled like pizza and his eyes were hard, like he wanted Jake to cry or run away. "You don't belong here, loser." To prove his point, Ethan reached out and flicked Jake's tray. The plastic tray tipped, and Jake's chips and fries spilled onto the floor with a soft thud. The cafeteria burst into laughter, loud and sharp, like a wave crashing over Jake. Kids pointed, whispered, and laughed some more. Ethan stood back, crossing his arms, looking proud of himself. Jake's heart was pounding now, so loud he thought everyone could hear it. His cheeks burned and his fists were so tight his nails dug into his palms, but he didn't look up. He didn't yell or push back. He just sat there, silent, staring at the mess on the floor. To everyone watching, he looked weak, scared, like he was giving up. But that wasn't the whole story, not even close. What Ethan didn't see, what nobody saw, was the tiny spark in Jake's eyes. It wasn't fear or sadness, it was something else, something sharp and alive, like a fire starting to glow. Jake wasn't just taking Ethan's bullying. He wasn't just sitting there feeling sorry for himself. No, Jake was watching. He noticed everything: Ethan's smirk, the way his friends copied him, the way the other kids laughed but looked nervous too. Jake's mind was working, even if his mouth stayed shut. He was waiting. For what? Nobody knew. Not yet. The lunch bell rang, and Ethan gave Jake one last mean look. "See you around, loser," he said, tossing the apple onto the table. It rolled and stopped right in front of Jake. Ethan's crew walked away, still laughing, high-fiving each other like they'd won something big. The other kids in the cafeteria went back to their food or their friends, but a few kept sneaking glances at Jake, whispering to each other. Poor kid, they thought, he's got no chance. Jake waited until Ethan was gone. Then he reached down, picked up his spilled chips, and set his tray straight. His hands were steady now, not shaking at all. He took a slow breath and pushed his hair out of his eyes. The spark was still there, hidden deep, but stronger than before. He wasn't crying. He wasn't running to a teacher. He was just thinking, planning maybe, or remembering something nobody else knew about. See, Jake wasn't like the other kids in that cafeteria. He wasn't just the new kid with old sneakers and a quiet voice. There was something different about him, something big. But he kept it locked up tight, like a secret treasure nobody could find. Why didn't he stand up to Ethan? Why didn't he yell or push back? That's what the other kids wondered as they watched him clean up his tray and walk out of the cafeteria, head down, hoodie up. The truth was, Jake didn't want to fight. Not yet. He didn't want to make a scene or get in trouble. He just wanted to get through the day like always. But Ethan's words stuck in his head, buzzing like angry bees. Loser, pathetic. They hurt, even if Jake didn't show it. And deep down, part of him wondered how long he could keep staying quiet. How long could he let Ethan and his buddies laugh at him? How long could he hide who he really was? As Jake walked down the hallway to his next class, kids whispered about what happened. "Did you see Ethan mess with that kid?" One girl said. "Yeah, he didn't even do anything," a boy answered, shaking his head. To them, Jake looked like he was scared, like he was weak. But Jake wasn't thinking about what they thought. He was thinking about Ethan's grin. He was thinking about that apple rolling on the table. He was thinking about the spark in his own eyes and what it might mean if he let it grow. What was Jake thinking? Could he really let this slide? Was he going to keep letting Ethan push him around, or was something else coming? Something bigger. If you want to know, you've got to keep watching. Because Jake's story isn't over, and the next part, it's going to surprise everyone. Days turned into weeks at Lincoln Middle School, and things didn't get easier for Jake Carter. If anything, they got harder. Ethan Reed, the tall 8th grader with the mean grin, wasn't done picking on Jake. Not even close. It was like Ethan had made it his mission to make Jake's life tough. In the hallways, Ethan would shove Jake's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "Move it, loser," he'd say, laughing as Jake caught himself against a locker. Other kids saw it happen, but they didn't do anything. Some laughed along with Ethan, trying to look cool. Others just looked away, too scared to say a word. Nobody wanted to mess with Ethan and his loud, pushy friends. Ethan didn't stop at shoves. He'd make fun of Jake's clothes, too. Jake's sneakers were old, with frayed laces and scuffed toes. They weren't fancy like Ethan's bright red ones. One day, Ethan pointed at them in the cafeteria line. "Nice shoes, new kid. Did you find them in a dumpster?" His buddies howled with laughter and Jake's face got hot. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his tray and walked away, head down, like always. Ethan loved that. It made him feel big, like he was the boss of everyone. Sometimes Ethan got sneakier. He'd accidentally bump into Jake in the hall, sending Jake's books crashing to the floor. Papers would scatter and Jake would have to kneel down to pick them up while Ethan walked off, whistling like nothing happened. Kids would step around Jake, pretending not to see. Nobody helped. Nobody said, "Hey, that's not fair." It was like Jake was invisible to everyone except Ethan, who saw him as a target. Now, Jake never fought back, not once. He didn't yell or push or even glare at Ethan. He'd just fix his books, tie his shoes, or keep walking. That made Ethan bolder. Every time Jake stayed quiet, Ethan's grin got wider. "This kid's too easy," he'd tell his friends, and they'd nod, ready to follow his lead. To them, Jake was weak, scared, an easy win. But there were moments, small ones, that made you wonder if Jake was really what he seemed. Little hints that something was different about him, like one day in gym class when the kids were playing dodgeball. Ethan saw Jake standing near the wall and thought it was the perfect chance to mess with him. He grabbed a ball and tried to trip Jake as he ran by, sticking out his foot with a smirk. Most kids would have fallen flat on their face, but not Jake. He dodged with a quick step, so smooth it looked like he'd practiced it 100 times. The move was fast, almost too fast to notice. Ethan blinked, surprised, but Jake just kept moving, blending back into the game. Nobody else saw it, but for a second, Ethan's smirk wasn't so sure. Another time, during basketball, something even stranger happened. Ethan's friend, a kid named Tyler, threw a ball hard, aiming right for Jake's head. It wasn't an accident. Tyler was laughing before the ball even left his hands. Everyone froze, expecting Jake to get hit, but Jake didn't. Without even turning around, he reached up and caught the ball with one hand, like it was no big deal. The ball smacked into his palm, and he tossed it back to the coach, barely looking. The gym went quiet for a second. The coach, Mr. Harris, raised an eyebrow and said, "Nice catch, Carter." Ethan just snorted. "Lucky catch, weirdo," he called out, but his voice wasn't as loud as usual. Jake didn't say anything. He just went back to the game, his face blank, like nothing had happened. Those moments were small, but they stuck out. They were like tiny cracks in a wall, showing something hidden underneath. Most kids didn't notice. They were too busy running, shouting, or trying to stay out of Ethan's way. But one person did notice. Her name was Mia, a girl from Jake's science class. Mia had curly black hair and a habit of asking lots of questions. She wasn't loud like Ethan or quiet like Jake. She was somewhere in the middle, always watching, always thinking. Mia started paying attention to Jake after the dodgeball game. She saw how he moved, careful but not clumsy. She saw how his eyes stayed sharp even when Ethan was in his face yelling mean things. Most kids would look scared or mad, but Jake didn't. He looked calm, like he knew something nobody else did. It made Mia curious. Who was this new kid? Why didn't he ever fight back? One day after school, Mia decided to find out. Jake was walking across the field, his backpack bouncing on one shoulder. Most kids were gone off to catch buses or hang out with friends. Jake was alone like always. Mia ran to catch up, her sneakers kicking up dust. "Hey Jake," she called. Jake stopped and turned, looking surprised. Nobody ever called his name like that, friendly and loud. Mia caught her breath and stood in front of him. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" she asked. Her voice was soft, not mean, but straight to the point. "Ethan and those guys, they're jerks. Why don't you do something?" She tilted her head, waiting for an answer. Now Jake looked at her for a long moment. His brown hair fell into his eyes and he pushed it back. For a second, Mia thought he wouldn't say anything, just like in the cafeteria or the halls. But then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "It's not worth it," he said. He shrugged like it was no big deal and started walking again. Mia frowned and followed him. "Not worth it. They push you around every day. Don't you get mad?" She wasn't trying to be nosy. She really wanted to know. Jake was different and she could feel it. Now Jake stopped again. He looked at the ground, then up at the sky like he was thinking hard. "I don't need to fight," he said finally. "Not now." His voice was still soft, but there was something in it, a kind of strength Mia hadn't heard before. It wasn't loud or angry. It was calm, like a river that looks still but runs deep. Mia stared at him, her mouth open a little. "Okay," she said slowly, "but I don't get it." Jake gave her a small smile, just a tiny curve of his lips, and then he turned and walked away. Mia stood there, watching him go, her mind buzzing with questions. What did he mean, not now? Why was he so calm? Was he really afraid, or was he holding back for a reason? Jake's words stayed with Mia all night. She thought about them while doing her homework, while eating dinner, even while brushing her teeth. There was something about Jake, something big. She didn't know what it was, but she wanted to find out. And she wasn't the only one wondering. Those little moments, the dodge, the catch, the calm way he answered, were like puzzle pieces. They didn't make a full picture yet, but they were starting to fit together. Was Jake scared like everyone thought? Or was he keeping something inside, waiting for the right time to let it out? Nobody knew. Not Ethan, not Mia, not even you. But the answer's coming, and it's going to be bigger than anyone thinks. Keep watching, because Jake's story is just getting started. The school's annual talent show was the biggest night at Lincoln Middle School. Everyone was talking about it for weeks, kids, teachers, even parents. The gym was going to be packed, with bright lights and loud music, and every kid wanted to be part of it. Ethan Reed and his crew were no different. They signed up to show off their skateboarding tricks, mostly because Ethan loved being the center of attention. He wanted everyone to cheer for him, to think he was the coolest kid in school. The whole school buzzed with excitement, whispering about who would perform and who would win the crowd's love. But Jake Carter, nobody knew he was planning something. Not his teachers, not his classmates, not even Mia, the girl who'd started to notice him. Jake kept it quiet like always. The night of the talent show finally came. The gym was stuffed with people. Kids sat on bleachers, giggling and pointing. Parents stood in the back, holding phones to record their kids. The air smelled like popcorn and gym socks, and the lights were so bright they made everything sparkle. Jake sat in the crowd, his hoodie pulled up, his brown hair falling into his eyes. Nobody looked at him. Nobody thought he'd be part of this. To them, he was just the quiet kid, the one Ethan picked on, the one who never fought back. The show started with a bang. A group of girls sang a pop song, their voices loud and wobbly. Then a boy played the drums, banging so hard the crowd cheered. Everyone was having fun, clapping and shouting. Ethan's group was up next, and the gym got even louder. Ethan and his buddies rolled onto the stage with their skateboards, wearing shiny helmets and baggy shirts. They flipped their boards, jumped over boxes, and spun in circles. Half their tricks were messy, boards slipped, and one kid almost fell, but the crowd didn't care. They clapped and yelled anyway, mostly because Ethan was grinning like he owned the whole school. He soaked up the cheers, waving his arms to make everyone scream louder. When they finished, he bowed, smirking like he'd already won the night. Jake watched from the bleachers, his face hidden in his hood. He didn't clap, he didn't boo, he just sat there waiting. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, walked to the microphone, her heels clicking on the stage. "Next up," she said, reading from a card, "Jake Carter." The gym went quiet for a second, like everyone was holding their breath. Then whispers started, spreading like ripples in a pond. "Jake," a girl said, frowning. "Who's that?" "The new kid," a boy answered. "The quiet ones." Ethan laughed loudest of all, his voice cutting through the whispers. "This'll be a disaster," he said, elbowing his friends. They snickered, leaning back in their seats, ready to watch Jake mess up. Mia, sitting a few rows away, tilted her head. She didn't laugh, she just watched, her eyes curious. Jake stood up from the bleachers and walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavy, like the whole school was staring at him. They were, kids whispered, some giggled, and Ethan's laugh echoed in the big gym. Jake didn't look at them. He kept his head down, his hands in his hoodie pockets, and climbed the steps to the stage. He didn't have a fancy costume like the singers or shiny gear like Ethan's crew. He wore his usual clothes, baggy jeans, old sneakers, and that gray hoodie he always had on. Under the bright spotlight, he looked small, like he didn't belong there. The crowd waited. Ethan leaned forward, smirking, ready to make fun of whatever Jake did. Mia bit her lip, wondering what was about to happen. For a moment, everything was still. Jake stood in the middle of the stage, the light shining on his messy hair. He looked nervous, or maybe he was just thinking. Nobody could tell. Then the music started. It wasn't a soft song or a silly tune. It was a sharp, pulsing beat like something from an action movie. The sound filled the gym, making kids sit up straighter.